Your Creative Push, episode 324.
It just hit me like, man, I do not have to apologize for how I choose to thrive.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Sada Crawford. Sada is an artist and an athlete who has always struggled with the question, am I an artistic athlete or an athletic artist? She's an ultra-marathoner as well as a jewelry maker, and she comes on the show today to talk about both things, her history as an ultra-marathoner and also how she first got interested in making jewelry. She also discusses the similarities between those two things and also the difference between her killer instincts in racing versus her shyness to, quote, win at art. Sada also talks about dealing with her own feelings that being a jeweler is a less legitimate form of art than other forms of art, and how calling herself a maker allows her the permission to try out other forms of art. She also talks about the importance of remembering that art is meant to make others feel happy and the need for creative individuals to find their tribe. She also discusses a vow that she made to herself. I don't want to give any other details because it's a powerful story, one of my favorite aspects of this episode today. And finally, she talks about the various ways that she's attempting to get into the back door of the industry with her creative partner, Tara, and then puts the cherry on top with a very special final push, which offers you 4 unique and powerful ideas to help you in your creative life. When it comes to the final push, which we'll talk about afterwards, you might want to take notes. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Sada Crawford. Sada, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thanks, Youngman. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited about this.
I am really excited about this too because you've got a lot going on. You have had a lot going on in your life, which I can't wait to talk about. But you have a lot of things kind of flourishing and going forward for you right now in your creative career. So I'm super excited to kind of speak to you at this moment in your life.
Thank you. Thanks. I waited a little while thinking like everything had to be perfect or I don't know, I had to be super successful already. And then you said something in one of your podcasts a couple of weeks ago about how you wished that more people who were still in the process would come on and talk to them while they were still going through changes and the yucky stuff. So I thought, oh, that's perfect. I'll contact him again.
Good. Yeah. The yucky stuff. I love it. And you're right. I think nobody really quite feels like they made it ever. You know, there's the goalposts always keep moving. So, when you put things like, you know, having a conversation about it or trying to help somebody else, perhaps going into teaching or, you know, a whole plethora of things, you can always have that excuse of, oh, someday, you know, when this, you know, gatekeeper gets to tell me that I've made it, but it never quite gets there and you just got to jump into it. So I'm so excited you did reach out.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to give my guests the opportunity at the beginning to kind of give a brief overview, tell us who you are and how you got to the point you are today in your life and kind of creatively speaking.
Okay. I won't spend a lot of time on it because I think I believe in moving forward and, you know, backwards isn't the way I'm going, but I've always been creative. I was so lucky to grow up in a family that really honored that, and especially with the women. My mom was an art teacher. My grandmother was an artist. My great-grandmother was an artist. And I mean, I literally grew up like under my mom's loom, listening to the shuttles as they were shuttling above my head and playing with the cat as it played with all the yarn balls. And she had a kiln. She taught photography. She taught metalsmithing. She really nourished that. And we really weren't allowed to watch a lot of TV or anything like that. So, you know, when we were bored, she just put crayons and markers and glitter and glue and paint in front of us. And it really made a big impression on me and formed my life. Another thing she did that was great was, like, if I made a drawing that she really liked, she wouldn't say, oh, that's good. She'd say, that's good because you tell the story, you fill all the corners of the page. Look at the detail that you put in that little section right there. I love those colors. As a parent now, I think that was just so cool that she was teaching me how to think as she was giving those compliments. From that, I went into a fine and performing arts high school, my later years of high school, and then art college. And now I'm still taking classes. I'm fortunate enough to live in Jackson Hole. And here at the Center for the Arts, you can pretty much take any classes. Like if something doesn't actually exist, you can talk to a teacher about private instruction. So I'm really lucky for that.
Absolutely. I wanted to jump back to what you said about being, having a mother that told you why it was good. And I think that that's, something for every parent out there. It's an important thing to do. But also like when you're critiquing somebody, or you have an artistic partner, or even commenting on Instagram and trying to be supportive that way, to say the why of why something's good or why you like something. And hopefully you can get that in return, so that, you can get that kind of feedback where, you're doing things right, or where maybe you need to do some more work.
Absolutely. And I think it's more authentic than just saying like, oh, I really like that, or you did a good job. Like you said, it teaches them why, but it teaches them how to think. What is important in a picture? Things they may not have thought about. They may not have thought that they were putting great detail in one section. So I tried to do that with my daughter as I was raising her. She ended up going to art school.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
Well, you also have this other life as well. And when you reached out to me, I thought it was a very interesting thing, because you had so many different parallels between creativity and this other incredible hobby that you have as well. So I was wondering if you could talk about that part of your life too.
Yes, actually, I feel like a poser in that right now because I'm injured, and I have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I won't. I don't know why I have to put that out there, I guess. But so I am an ultra runner, and I have been for 9 or 10 years. Before that, I did marathons just for fun, though. And there have been periods in my life when I haven't run as seriously as I normally do. I've actually run since 4th grade and been racing since 4th grade, if you count like school races and things like that. So that's like almost 43 years. It's just been a constant in my life. And a few years ago, well, almost 10 years ago now, I was in an accident. And in the course of recovering from that, I ran longer and further, and thinking to myself, like, if I can do 5 more miles, then that means I'm healing. And it was also another way to just run off a lot of anger because of how I got in the accident. But I fell in love with it. And like I said, when I said to you, it does have parallels with being creative, because when you're out on a run, you're literally choosing your next footstep, but you're choosing paths, you're thinking about paths and trails and the difference between paths and trails, and you're thinking about the weather and which direction you're going to go, and you're being constantly bombarded with visual imagery and thinking about that. So I'm really lucky to enjoy both. Sometimes it's a struggle to find balance, because I'll go off on binges, like either be super creative or super athletic. And honestly, I am trying to find a balance in that. It's been a struggle for a long time.
Right. Well, I found that a lot of guests that have, different major things that they do in their life, whether it's creativity plus something else, whether it's an athlete or 2 different types of creativity, or just having multiple full-time jobs or hobbies. The only way to approach it, I think, effectively and to find that balance is to go like super hardcore into one and almost not ignore the other one, but, definitely have the other one be kind of in the background as you're super laser focused on the one thing, and then get super laser focused on the other thing. It does help you to be on both extremes and then kind of taper down to like the middle ground, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's good that you're putting a positive spin on it, because I think people they get down on themselves. I know I do. And for instance, I had a high school art teacher tell me, you have to make a decision. You either have to be a creative or an athlete. And I mean, I've struggled with it to this day. I think, am I I've settled on creative athlete, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't think anybody should tell you how you should define yourself. And that's an interesting quote, because who are they to say, you have to define yourself as one thing first or the other thing first? Like, one of the things we talk about on the podcast all the time is that you don't have to define yourself by the thing that you do to make money first. That's what everybody does, but you can define yourself by the thing that brings you the most joy and the most passion, and then say, your job as a second or third thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this role of society that society puts on us, like our teachers and parents. You have to define yourself this way, and it's so wrong. Like, you can define yourself however you want, but then when you have this like kind of mandate by the world around you telling you, no, like, people don't do that. People aren't both things, and they don't, balance both things perfectly. No, you have to pick one or the other. Like, that puts like this like awful kind of poison in your brain, so that when you're doing the one thing, like, and going, hog wild with it and going full force, you feel guilty
I know
about the other thing. It's terrible.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that.
Now, what are some of the strategies that you have kind of figured out to maybe feel less guilty as you struggle to find that balance?
Well, I plan my races. I used to do it like in January. I'd plan pretty much until September. Now that I'm running longer distances and really liking like the 100 miles and the 100 mile and above, I'll only plan maybe 6 months out, because I won't know how I'm going to feel after that. If I'm going to be burned out, I might want to cut back to 100 Ks or 50 milers every once in a while.
Cut back.
Well,
no, I know. It's just funny to
me. And so that kind of helps me, knowing that schedule's out there, because then I can also plan my creative periods along that line too. And honestly, training makes you, it's exhausting. And when I'm training for the longer run races, it's probably an average of 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. Usually I like to do 3.5 hours a day. And then on the weekends, I'll do long runs. But my long runs are like 30, 35 miles for Badwater in Brazil, 100, 135. The highest I got was a 45-mile run. And these are by myself. So it takes a lot out on you physically, but also, it's kind of a mental drain. It's not a whole lot of fun. And I'll be tired, and I'll know that like that week, I'm not going to get a lot done in the studio. I'm just not.
Right. But as you're on your run and then exercising and out there, and are you thinking about that kind of stuff? Like, what goes through your head? Do you have to like be laser focused into, where you're taking your next step, or how you're breathing and all that kind of stuff? Or do you have time to let your mind wander? Because one of the things we talk about all the time on this podcast is, getting out in nature, taking a walk or whatever, just to clear your head and to also work out ideas or come up with inspiration. But do you get to do that doing what you do?
I do, and I can certainly get in the flow state really easily, just because I've been doing it for so long and it's second nature. Having said that, though, living where I do, I can't relax, because I am literally afraid for my life on every long run, or even the short ones. We have so much wildlife here. We've got moose, wolves, grizzly bears, cougars, you name it. And I seem to be this animal magnet. My friends tease me for it. I'm like, yeah, if you want to see some wildlife when you're visiting Jackson Hole, go for a run with me because we're going to see something. So I can't really relax all the way. I always have to have that in the back of my mind. I run with bear spray, which I don't really think would do anything, especially if the wind's blowing in your direction. But that helps a little bit. It's probably a false sense of security, but it lets me relax a little bit and enjoy the run more. And also, frankly, I choose those places I like to go into the backcountry if I can. So it's not as relaxing back there, but it's more fun. But yeah, I mean, like if I'm running in Pasadena or when I go home to Michigan, oh God, I totally notice the change. And it's like, wow, I can really relax when I run. This is a lot more fun sometimes.
Right. And then are you thinking about your art when you're doing it, or is it other kind of creative thoughts?
Yeah, I do. A lot of times there's just this monologue in my head talking through a project, if that makes sense. I don't know why I do it that way rather than see it visually, but when I'm done, I'll get home and jot down notes and have a ton of ideas.
And then does it get frustrating to you? Because I have never done that long of a run in my life, but I imagine, I am tired when I get home from like an 8-hour, pretty easy job, but I can't imagine like how completely exhausted you must feel when you get back and, want to jot the ideas down. Maybe you're excited to get to the ideas, but that you're, currently in training for this other thing. And then does the guilt really start to weigh in then? Or is it like kind of this like excitement, this build up for all these ideas that you have that you can't quite get to now? Like, how do you balance that in that respect?
Well, so I'm training to win. I'm going above and beyond what a lot of even ultra runners do. And part of my training, I really believe, is that when I get done with a long run, so I go for a 35-mile run, I get back, I'm wiped out. I'll lie on the floor for a few minutes and my boyfriend just laughs at me and brings me a cheeseburger and a beer or something. But
nice.
I'll have like a half-hour downtime, then and pound some protein, pound some salt and electrolytes and fluid. I've taught myself to recover really quickly. I'll go get in the shower and then I'll try to have a normal day beyond that, because in the really long races like Brazil 135 and Badwater, you need to be able to do things like that. You need to be able to, if shit comes to hell and you're on the side of the road with blisters and you relax for 10 minutes or something, you've got to be able to get back up and maybe run 100 more miles. So I kind of discovered this last year when I was training for Brazil, but if I train myself to recover really quickly, and then it really helped in the race. It was amazing. And it just becomes second nature. But so for the creative part though, of course I don't just jump right into being creative, because I find that takes sort of a whole nother kind of energy. Generally when I'm done with a hard week, especially on Sunday, I give myself Sundays off. I'll just go into the studio and binge.
When you say binge and when you get to your art, especially when you have a lot of time, you're not training for a race or you happen to be injured, is it very similar to the way that you train for races? Like, are you binging and just going nonstop and not kind of taking a break, or is it a different process?
Yeah. I mean, I strive for balance and I'm trying to achieve that. That's one of my goals this year, but, God, yeah, totally. I mean, for instance, I've been injured, so I haven't been running that much at all. And I don't know where all this energy is coming from, maybe because it's been repressed for a couple of years, but I cannot stop being creative. It's like this fountain that's just overflowing. And the cool thing about it is I don't get the sense that it's ever going to run dry. I've just like tapped into some electrical socket and am on fire, and I love it, but there's no balance. Like my boyfriend went out of town before the holidays. He was gone for a couple of days, and I stayed in his place because it's closer to town and the art center. And for 3 days, I never got out of the first pair of pajamas that I wore on the first day. So I never showered.
Nice.
My hair was all greasy. It was just disgusting. And I was getting up at like 6:30 in the morning. And as I have a cup of coffee, I'm starting a project. Like, I can't wait to get it started. And I was stopping at maybe 1 at night. So I wouldn't even stop to, well, I'd eat, but I wouldn't stop to eat. I'd just kind of plow through my food too.
Yes.
It's just, it can get out of control.
Yeah. I think that's sometimes okay though, because I know for writing for me and for a lot of people that I've spoken with, it's like sometimes even though it does feel like it's never going to end, it does end. And it's like you have to definitely take advantage of the time the times where you have the energy to get it all out and just the inspiration keeps coming to you. And, some shower, maybe you don't need a shower tonight if the muse is like actually there,
Or this week.
or this week. Exactly. I think, and especially we're talking in January, and I always promote this cramuary idea where it's like cramming your giant big goal and trying to complete it in 1 month. And sometimes, if you know that you have that endpoint anyway, that this isn't going to last forever, and by the end of the month, if I can complete this project, then I can relax a little bit. It makes it a little bit more excusable to not shower or maybe not eat the right way for a period of time, in sacrifice to your art, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your art specifically, your jewelry design, and what you've been up to in this binging of creating art.
Well, it's weird for me to consider myself a jeweler because I went to school for photography and fiber arts, and then after college, I worked with Patagonia in the art department at first, but then started contracting with them later as a stylist. And then I picked up other clients, and I traveled all over the world. And this is back in the days of film. So when we had a rain day or a down day when we weren't shooting, the crew would go into town and go to the secondhand stores and thrift stores and really cool, funky little antique stores. We're all over, Buenos Aires, New Zealand. And I was like a raven. I'd be attracted to anything shiny and cool. But when I stopped doing that, I had so much stuff like beads, fabric, yarn, ribbon, metal, I have everything. And on top of that, I have all of these art supplies. I've never restricted myself in buying any of that. So I just started making necklaces with it. And to me, it seems frivolous sometimes. I guess. I don't know. I have a hard time saying I'm a jeweler because it's not something that, I don't know. I mean, painting doesn't save lives either, but it just seems less legit. And I have to tell myself that I consider myself a maker, and that what I'm doing is making women feel beautiful. I'm making them happy. I'm putting a smile on their face when they put on one of my pieces, or when somebody buys it and gives it as a gift, they're both really happy. And that makes me feel, I don't know, less guilty than that I'm not doing serious art or something like that. And then I've recently gotten into metalsmithing, which I love. I didn't expect that, but it's really elemental, and you're playing with fire and metal, and it gets, changes temperature. It's cold when you're wearing it against you, but then when you torch it, obviously it gets hot and it turns all these different colors and all sorts of chemical things happen. And it's a whole new way of thinking for me. And it's been really healthy, actually. It's been really grounding to work with the elements, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, and that's why I do really like the idea of calling yourself a maker instead of a jeweler. If you define yourself too tightly as a jeweler, it might make you, or for anybody else listening, not want to venture into something different like metalsmithing and venturing into new avenues. I think we all are these kind of just creative people that can do anything that we want to, anything that piques our interest. Of course, maybe not getting too much of the shiny object syndrome and diving into too many different things, but allowing yourself to be a maker, be kind of versatile and allowed, you have the permission to go into something new and try something new out.
Mm-hmm. And I like the analogy to making people happy. If you think of artists from when time began, what we're doing is making beautiful things that people either back then revered or, in more contemporary times just love. And it lights up your room if you have an incredible painting in there. It makes you happy every time you look at it. And I think that really is important, especially in these times.
Absolutely, in these times. Well, when you're making something, then are you are you doing it for like what you consider beautiful, what you consider to make you happy, or do you have the person who's going to end up with it in mind and what they consider beautiful and what makes them happy?
I maybe should consider them every once in a while, but I don't. I am just lost in what I'm making and what colors I want to use, what stones I want to use. That part I really do like in terms of being a jeweler, because the stones are just fascinating to me, in geology. And I think about that when I'm trail running too. In fact, I collect a lot of my stones when I'm trail running. Sorry about that. I'm just thinking of combining things in new ways. And I really get into the textures, maybe from my fiber arts training, but I love using like linen and straw and wood, glass, metal, stones. And my pieces are pretty crazy sometimes, and not a lot have sold. So maybe I should really consider that. But I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to think of the customer first, because that just kills it. It kills your creativity. And that's probably really irrational, but that's what art's for, man.
No, I don't think it's irrational at all. And I think it's very important. And we were talking, through email before jumping on this call, and you mentioned something about one of the interesting parallels actually to ultra running, and people saying, "Oh, you're this crazy ultra runner," and you feeling like you always had to like justify it to them, but then you kind of had that realization that it really is just for you. Like it's this thing that nobody gets to see, nobody gets to be with you like on the run, and I think it parallels precisely to the creative process, because unless you're a musician, well, even if you are a musician that does live performances, like there's so many hours that you're just by yourself, just working on, your music, or you're working on your jewelry, or, editing your writing, or the multitude of things that people do that brings themselves joy. That always has to come first, because it is for you in the long run.
Yeah.
No pun intended, long run. Sorry.
Anytime you start, no, it's fine. It just hit me like, man, I do not have to apologize for how I choose to thrive. And it's the same with art. And I just took a business for artists class this fall, and we had to write 4 different types of artist statements. Actually, it was kind of interesting, but my like not short elevator pitch or the long gallery artist statement, but the one in between made me realize I think it's really healthy for anybody to do this, because you have to define yourself. You have to think of what's really important about your art, how it makes you feel, all yada, yada, yada. But yeah, it gave me a backbone. I love it. I have it hanging on my wall, and every time I look at it, I just think like, yeah, you go, girl.
And do you repeat that to yourself? Like, do you like use that for inspiration if you're ever feeling down or uninspired or any of the above?
I do. I hadn't actually read it for like a month, and getting ready for this interview, I got it out and I was reading through it. And I think it's really important and critical for any artist to do, because if you're struggling about why you do something, or which medium is important to you and why, it really, if you have to write it down, and like in this case, we had 5 days to do it. And I loved that limitation, because otherwise it would have taken me a year.
Right. I'm with you.
But yeah, I mean, it was great to work within that parameter, and I got it done, and it's all right there in front of me.
I wanted to talk about that accident that you mentioned that got you into ultra running. Has that like mindset that you had to go through, like that whole process of going through that and kind of, I guess, evolving or sort of into like this different person, like pushing through it, and like coming out the other end, like to the other extreme where you weren't supposed to run a certain amount, and now you're running like more than any human should ever run, like in a whole year. what has that process done for you, like going forward? Like, did you see that like anything is possible, especially when it comes to your creative process, your new creative business and stuff like that?
Yeah, it really did. So about 10 years ago, my daughter and we both rode horses. She did it more seriously than I did, but I love it. God. I mean, at one point I rode horses as much as I run. And we were getting ready for a show, and our horse, for a bunch of different reasons, was really, really nervous. He was a freak of a horse anyway. He was always just super high strung, and you couldn't depend on him. But long story short, I was cleaning his hooves before this show, and it was December, and it was early in the morning, and I was squatted down with his back hoof in my hand, cleaning it. And I noticed that like his tail was starting to flick and he was kind of twitching. And I thought, oh, well, there's flies. He's flicking away the flies with his tail. I mean, all these thoughts went through my head in like 1 second, but now it seems like 10 minutes. And then I thought, like, it's December. There's not flies around. And I was like, oh, shit. And I started standing up. And as I stood up, he kicked me and broke my femur in half. And because I was in the process of standing up, it broke 2 directions. Like it broke in half, but it also the bones didn't line up anymore. They were, totally. It was a wreck, and it was nearly fatal. I was really lucky that he didn't hit any arteries. That can often happen. You can bleed out when you break your femur. Well, actually, something else happened that I want to talk about after that. But okay. In the recovery process, I'm not supposed to run more than 8 miles at a time, which is pretty funny. I did.
Which to me seems like a very generous amount. I'm like, oh, great. I'll never do that. Cool.
I know.
Sorry, go ahead.
So in the process of recovering, I just, God, I was so fucking angry at that horse and in so much pain. It's like having your hand slammed in a car door 24 hours a day for 3 years. It's the most unbearable pain I can imagine. And people say that it's the most painful break you can have. I totally believe that. I mean, the muscles were torn. I have a rod from my hip to my knee and screws, and that hurt. The healing from that hurt. Building the bone back together hurt, and it leached calcium from my other bones, which I didn't know about. I wish somebody had told me that would happen, because I ended up with other breaks. Just running further and further and further to me was like, yeah, I did 8 miles this week and I could only do 6 last week. I'm getting better, and God damn it, that horse is not going to win. I'm going to come out on the other side. And then I started racing, and I did really well. And I still had the pain. And this is kind of interesting. I would use creative ways to deal with it. Specifically, if I was running down a trail and just like sometimes the pain felt like a dull ache, and sometimes it was like a screaming pain. So if it was white hot pain, I would see red and orange in the forefront of my mind. I would just see this color, and then I'd do the opposite. I'd think green, and this is like in the middle of a race, mind you, but all I'm thinking about is jungle green, cool green, fir green, evergreens, just trying to think of the opposite color of what the pain was. And like when the pain was a dull, deep ache, to me, that was purple. And so I'd think of brighter colors. I'd think of orange and yellow and sunshine. And there must be some psychology to that, but that really worked. So in the long term, it has made me much more resilient. And I know that if I can survive that, I can survive anything. I did have a lot of anger issues, and it's taken years to work through that. But it helped make me a better racer.
Well, that's super interesting with the colors thing. I have heard something like that before. I'll have to look into it. I don't know what the psychology of it is, but yeah, focusing it on softer colors when or blue when you have that kind of red rage
Yeah.
going through you is actually an effective technique, and that's so crazy. Was your doctor telling you like stop? like this isn't good for you, or were they kind of on board as long as you were able to keep pushing?
No, not at all. I pretty much fired all of them.
Yeah.
And what sucked was my ex-husband works for a healthcare company, and he's a VIP, and so I had a red star next to my name. I mean, if I called the doctor for a hiccup, I could get in that day,
Mm-hmm.
We were treated very well, and I'm very grateful for that. I had the best doctors, but on the other end of that, they were not going to let me, being his wife, have any complications after the surgery. It would look bad for them. They were always pretty concerned about what I was doing, and over the course of a couple of different things happening, I just didn't trust them anymore. And as I was running further and doing better, I really had to make that leap and trust myself. And I didn't always make the right decisions. I mean, like I said, I got compensatory injuries and bone breaks on my other leg because I favored that one. But I just had to learn to trust myself. And actually, what I'd like to say is one thing that made a huge difference is right before I went into surgery, a chaplain came into my room. And so I'm lying there on the gurney and I'm all by myself. And I've said goodbye to my husband. He's going to meet me when I wake up. And, I've said goodbye to the surgeon. And I'm lying there and they give you like 20 minutes just to sit with yourself and be with yourself if you're not going to die right then and there. And this chaplain came in and said, would you like to pray with me? Is there anything that you would like to say or anything you'd like to think about? And first of all, it's alarming because you're thinking like, shit, am I going to die?
Right. Like, who sent you?
Exactly. But, man, it's still hard to talk about. I thought about it for a minute, and it's probably like the most important 20 minutes of my life. But I turned to him and I said, I'm really sorry, but I don't follow your faith and I need this time to spend alone.
Mm-hmm.
And as he left the room, I just thought, what the fuck have you just done? You're going to go to hell. Mm-hmm. Like, that was your last resort, just walking out the door. And then I thought, okay, I've got like 15 minutes now before I am put out and maybe not wake up from this. And I thought about everybody that I loved, and I thought about ways that I had hurt people and sort of mentally apologized to them, and thought about things that I'd done wrong in my life and decided how good or bad they were and whether or not I was going to go to hell. And I really thought, like, okay, self, do you really believe in God, or what do you believe in? And if you don't, is your sense of yourself enough to get you through this? If you died, would you be comfortable with that, I guess? And the last 5 minutes I spent trying to find that self, like trying to connect with my authentic self, like who is the I that is I, as Buddhists say. And I could not find it. And that's like the scariest thing that I think that can happen to you, is not being able to find yourself when you know that this might be it. And so when I woke up from surgery on the other end, that was my first thought, was like, are you fucking kidding me? You don't know who you are. You could not find yourself. I mean, you're the only one that's going to get you through this this life. It's high time that you did this. You had better figure this out. And I found it in ultra running. Like I found it in Death Valley at 3 a.m. when it's 118 degrees and the stars are above you. They usually have those races on full moons. And it's incredible. And you've got 100 miles to run and you're in pain, but that's when I find that self. And running has saved my life. It's amazing. And so it really hurts when people say like, oh, you're one of those crazy ultra runners or crazy artists, because these things are really important to us for some reason. Otherwise we wouldn't do them so much.
Right. Yeah. And I poke fun or I just think what you do is crazy because for me to consider myself doing it is crazy. But I think that what you said is so key. Like you shouldn't have to apologize for what you do, especially to yourself. If you're able to find yourself, which I think is like the hardest thing to do, and I think it's like the hardest thing to do because it's like our only really purpose here on earth is to, find ourselves. And I think that's why this creative thing is so important, because that's how you find yourself, whether it's pushing your body to the max and experiencing creativity in that way, or if it's figuring yourself out through art or writing or making jewelry, whatever it is. Like whenever you can get into that zone where you can spend a whole day not thinking about eating, not thinking about showering, just being comfortable with yourself and what you're putting out there, even if it is athletic output, all by yourself out there under the full moon. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's so true.
And good for you. I feel like if a chaplain came in, I would spend those 20 minutes just doing whatever he wanted to do. You know what I mean? No, like I think so many people would just be like, okay, like this is like the kind of script that the universe is giving to me or the hospital's giving to me or whatever. Like maybe this is the way that I'm supposed to find it. But like you knew yourself well enough that, you needed that time in silence, even if it is to come to a conclusion that you're not happy with, so that you can spend the rest of your life kind of answering that question.
Yeah. I guess you're right. I never thought about that I knew myself well enough to at least have faith that I'd be okay not following that script. Right.
I think for some people that's right there is a question that they struggle with their whole life, whether they were brought up in a certain religion or this whole religious question that I don't think any religion, every religion tries to answer, but we don't have like any definitive answer as to like why we're here or what we're doing. Everybody has their own opinion or their own feelings towards it. But so often like that's an idea that we push back in the back of our heads for our entire life and never really kind of struggle with or try to figure out. But knowing that you can say no to one particular instance where, no, this is your time, you can figure that other stuff out later.
Well, and I think it has to happen to everybody. Hopefully people are self-aware enough to be awake to notice that they have that opportunity, and this may be their calling and their time to investigate that. And hopefully it happens earlier in life. It's not when you're 90 or something, right. Yeah. Because it's made my life so much richer.
Absolutely. I like how deep we're going. I like this. But I actually wanted to ask you about, you said you train to win and you have won ultra marathons. Like this isn't just like a hobby for you. This is like something that you excel in. Does that, the way you train to win, does that ever seep into the creative process in a negative way where it's like, you're creating to win as opposed to, just kind of honing it back and just doing something that you enjoy?
Oh God, I'm struggling with this right now. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm hating myself for it right now. And that's not the aspect of it though. The aspect is like, okay, Sada, if you can be so successful at ultra running and other parts of your life, and you're obviously competitive. I always have been since a kid. I've always been competitive. If you can be that competitive, then why the hell can't you get it together to run your art as a business? Mm-hmm. I mean, why don't I want to be the best artist in Jackson Hole, or, you know, on Instagram? Well, actually, I don't. That's not a good goal. But you know what I mean? Like, what? Yeah. God, I that's my struggle right now. Is like I'm on that brink of making a living at it, and there's so many things that I just fool around with, like getting my website together, and you know, a lot of it's because I don't have the skills that I need. But even that, I could go get them. I don't understand why I'm not more competitive, or why I can't get my shit together in that way.
And that's a powerful thing, because what to some would seem like the hardest thing ever, to like run the Brazil 135, or you know, any of these other long runs, like that's like completely out of their realm of possibilities. But at least that is like one of these things that you can like train towards. Like, you know that, okay, there's a number that I need to get to, and it's 135 or whatever it may be. It's like a very linear type of thing. As hard, that's not to belittle it and not to say it's not hard, but then when you think about starting an art business, or you know, delving into a creative life, it's like this huge question mark where it could go any number of ways. And it's like trying to figure out that exact path. It's like sometimes like even more daunting than doing an ultra marathon. Exactly.
I mean, like right now, I think part of it is, you know, you don't know whether to try to make it not big on Instagram, but to try to use those tools to get a following, or if you want to approach galleries, or if you want to go to a store. For my stuff, I mean, I load up my pieces with so many things that cost me a lot of money, that my pieces would have to sell for a lot of money. So I've had stores tell me, I can't carry this because I'm not going to mark it up, you know, and nobody's going to be able to afford $1,000 necklace or something. But I think a lot of it also has to do, and I just thought of this, is that in ultra running, I have a tribe. Anybody in ultra running has a tribe. If you are an ultra runner, if you're just starting, if you're an advanced, you know, old pro, it's such an incredible and great community. There's so much love in it, and a lot of humor, because I mean, you know, we get pee on our legs when we pee. If we pee into the wind, we have pee all over. I mean, it's not glamorous, and you know, you're puking a lot on the road in front of people. It's just it makes an instant tribe that we can all relate to and laugh about and love each other. And we're all going through hell and putting ourselves through it. And that in itself is kind of funny. And I think I don't know, at least for me right now in my art world, there's not that friendliness. So it makes it more daunting to actually get my shit together, because I can't laugh about all this with anybody except you.
Well, I mean, if you join the Your Creative Push group, there's plenty of people in there that can help you and be part of your tribe. But not just that, there's plenty of communities out there, and just putting your stuff out there consistently on Instagram or social media, the tribe finds you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm taking classes. I may have mentioned that. I'm not sure if I did or not, but today was my first ceramics class, and I'm taking that for 6 weeks, I think.
Oh, nice.
And and I got in there, and there were 7 other women, and we all sat around the table, and it's going to be wonderful. It was really fun. I need to do that more often and get myself out and take more classes. I mean, I'm never done learning. We shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's one of the ridiculously easy ways to expand your horizons, but also to meet other people, whether it's your instructors or the people that you're in class with, because so often they've come from so many different walks of life and can show you things that you didn't even know existed, and new kind of paths that you can go down, and new things that you can learn. And then just having a kind of comrade, somebody that you can, share creative war art stories with.
Yeah, like I told you about my accountability partner and comrade, Tara. we came up with a calendar the last week of December, and it's for January, February, and March. And I haven't met this week's goals, I'll have to say, but we have weekly goals, we have monthly goals. I think we're going to be fine. We'll figure it out. Jackson's kind of constipated in the sense that I mean, it really is. You walk around downtown at first, and everything's cool. It's very cowboy. It's very Western. It's glamorous. It's cute, and all those other things. But after you live here for a while, you realize that the galleries only show the same people, and it's the art that tourists would want to buy. I mean, it's nice stuff. It's really good, beautiful art. And some of the tourists are like Ted Turner or Jennifer Aniston. Mm-hmm. So it's nice, high-end stuff. But there's not a break-in. You can't wedge in if you're just a person who lives here. And especially in the jewelry, it's all American Indian style, or it's all the same. It's all really constipated. So we're trying to find back doors, and I've become a really big advocate for back doors and breaking into the scene. And what haven't other people thought of? Like, we're approaching dude ranches to have trunk shows, and we're going to make our own magazine. There's beautiful magazines here, but it costs like $1,000 a page for advertising. And so we're going to make our own magazine. It's like, if it costs us $100 to print out something and go in with a couple other artists and make something beautiful. I mean, we're artists, right? We can make it. Absolutely. We can do anything. And so we're going to put that out. And I'm just thinking of all these back doors and creative ways to get into the business that other people aren't thinking about. I bought an Airstream this fall, and it's back in Michigan, but I want to drive it out here this summer and turn that into a working studio. And I'm so excited about that, because you see these pop-up stores. Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. But you see these pop-up stores everywhere, and also the Airstreams that have become studios. It's kind of the thing now, but there aren't any around here. If there aren't even any pop-up stores around here, it's like, I don't the town's pretty set in its ways. But I'm going to have my Airstream, damn it. And it's going to be an art studio, and I'm going to sell my stuff out of it. And Tara might share the space with me. I don't know. We're going to be disruptors.
I love that. I love the side door, the back door, and I love the idea of being a disruptor. I think that's the way to go. And I think that so often we're too scared to try something new or to ask for something. Like, just put yourself out there, try to do it, and see what happens. Yeah.
I mean, I got really discouraged because there's only so many times you can hit your forehead against the front door, right? And stand there with your hands on the glass looking in and just wish they'd let you in.
Let yourself in, break in.
Yeah, we're artists. We can figure this out. And also, we don't need somebody to rep us. We don't need somebody to take 50% of what we make, because that keeps me from selling it, because it marks the price up so much higher.
Right.
So I have to figure that out on my own.
Well, I think you will figure it out. And I love this right now, because I feel like you are right about to blast off.
I hope so.
Yeah, I feel it in like everything that you're doing and everything, just your excitement for it. So let's jump on another call this time next year and see what's going on.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, but I can't let you go yet without giving the final push. And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and just grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, so I have 4 brief ideas, and you're going to need to go to the dollar store and get a whole bunch of foam core pieces and poster board pieces. Like, seriously, spend $20 and get a whole bunch of them, and a big fat marker, and write your artist statement. Like we talked about that. It's just so empowering. I learned this second idea in therapy, and it changed my life and set me on the right direction. But if anything's blocking you, and whether you attribute, or align it with your life or your creativity, if anything's blocking you, if you've got an addiction, if you've got a problem that you're not facing, if you have a big choice to make, like in your marriage or your job, if you're depressed, write a timeline. Start from when you were born to now. Pick the middle year, your middle age, and put that in the middle. And then write down anything significant that happened to you. And ask your family and friends who were there at the time if they remember anything. For instance, when I was born, my mom was graduating from college, and she hoped to have me right after she graduated, but it turns out the day she graduated, so she had to go through finals, being pregnant with me. Yeah, talk about stress. And she and my dad were literally that day going to drive up to northern Michigan, move in with his parents, who weren't happy about the marriage even. And there was just all this stress around it. And I was born into that. And when I was telling my mom that I was writing this timeline, she's like, oh, well, yeah, well, let's consider this. This is how you started, and I picked up on it, not necessarily then, but all the stress in my early life and other important things like injuries that you had that may have affected you. I've had 6 head injuries, 6 concussions. It's amazing. But when I wrote them all down, and also things like, sexual abuse or sexual harassment or teachers saying things, and also write down like your job and your career path and, major significant life events. But anyway, when you get all of this in front of you on paper, it's so fascinating, and it can actually sift and shake up a lot of negative emotions too. So you have to be really gentle with yourself, but you realize patterns and you realize why you made decisions. And you realize that like bad decisions you made as a child that may have led to addictions, you were doing the best that you could with what you had at the time. And you forgive yourself and then let yourself sit with that for a few days. Don't rush it. Just feel it all. And then move on. And God, that was just life-changing for me to do all that, because I did see patterns, and I did see, I had developed an eating disorder when I was younger, and it made me realize like why. And it also makes you realize things that you can let go. You don't need to hang on to them anymore. Things that you're still doing that you did when you were younger that don't serve a purpose anymore. Oh, and a lot of that also is, you'll realize that things caused you shame, or that you're still ashamed for being a certain way. And you cannot flourish if you're living with any shame. You can't be creative to the best that you can be. You can't heal. You can't be a full person if you're living with any shame. So being able to remember all that and figure out where it came from and then let it go is just amazing. So the third idea is, and this is kind of neat, but I write a list of verbs, adjectives, and nouns. For instance, some of my verbs are transcending, floating, careening, propelling, dancing, stumbling, embracing, coming up for air, diving. Some of the adjectives are sacred, feral, limitless, free, uninhabited, true, bold, raw. And some of the nouns are just anything like stars, gnarly wood, leather, cowgirls, bluebells, river ripples, mud, holes in frayed jeans, and write those on foam core boards and just like free associate, just let your mind go. And then put those 3 boards up. And if you're stuck and can't come up with a creative idea, you'll start making lines between them. It's really cool. Like those lines you drew when you were a kid, like match the subject to this, other subject or whatever.
Right. The word to the picture.
Yeah. When you start doing that, oh my God, it jars these ideas that you never would have thought up anyway. It's really cool. The 4th idea I had, so this one's harder to describe, but I learned this in therapy too. Get a set of index cards, and on one side, write, if you were at your creative best and just flourishing, how would you feel? Like really happy, super creative. And then on the other side of it, right, didn't get out of bed today. I still have my pajamas on and it's 7 p.m. or whatever. And other cards, like just on days when you could be your best and are feeling your best and you're happiest and most productive, right? Like what it feels like, what happens, how people react to you on all those cards. And on the flip side, write the opposite of that. And then sometimes when I'm really stuck with something or I can't come up with ideas, I'll take those cards out and I'll lay them down on the floor and there'll be a line down the middle and it'll be like, did I get out of bed today before 7 o'clock? Yes. Okay. So that goes on the yay, we're winning side. Mm-hmm. Am I creating like I want to? No. So that goes on the other side. And then look at which side is winning and where you need to spend your energy. And it also kind of makes you realize like those things aren't really that hard to do. I can be a little bit happier today and be more creative if I did this and this and this. I don't know. It's really inspiring. And that it also jars ideas.
Right. And seeing how simple some of those things are
yeah,
that you kind of just do habitually. Did I scroll through Instagram for less or more than 15 minutes today?
Right.
And just like realizing all it takes is not doing that to put this over on this side. And that springboards another positive direction for me for another thing. It definitely is empowering.
Right.
4 very powerful things. I like them.
That's my creative push.
Sada, thank you so much for reaching out, for doing this. I know that, like you said, it's like sometimes it doesn't feel like it's the right time, but it's never going to feel like the right time. So might as well just do it. You know what I mean? And now you can wait a year and we'll do it again, and then another year and we'll do it again, and then see how much you continue to flourish.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your patience and for this opportunity. And I'm so grateful for what you do. I've listened to all your shows. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah.
That's like the least embarrassing thing in my opinion. You should be embarrassed that you haven't listened twice. No, just kidding.
So really, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, I'm honored. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, you can find Sada on her website, ideafarmdesigns.com. On Etsy, she is Idea Farm Designs. On Instagram, she is Sada Crawford. We'll have everywhere else linked up at yourcreativepush.com/Sada, SADA. Sada, thanks again.
Thank you.
My thanks to Sada once again for coming on the show. I just have to say here at the end, go back and listen to that final push once again. She put a lot of time and effort into that final push. And when I went back and listened to it for the second time, it made me realize that there are some things that I can do in my life, things that I maybe need to do to not just better my creative output, but to better my life. So I want you to go back and listen to the final push and ask yourself, which of those 4 ideas do you need to do? Not just which one is easiest for you or most interesting to you. Which one do you know deep down inside that you need to do? Is it the idea generation thing? Is it finding your purpose, your thesis, making your artist statement? Is it dealing with your unchecked resistance, looking back at the timeline of your life and taking a deep and sometimes hard look and investigating the things that might have happened to you in your life that have made you the way that you are now, and then realizing that it's not your fault? Or is it checking in with yourself and finding the small ways to flip the script on your daily life, to flip the index card and to turn perhaps one of the negative aspects of your day into a positive aspect of your day? So a simple call to action today from me, just go back and re-listen to that. I'm sure one of those 4 ideas, one of those 4 exercises popped out to you when you first listened to it, but listen back again and think about which of those things is the thing that you need to do in order to help you get things moving in the right direction, whether it's short-term, medium-term, or long-term. On our next episode, we have Elisa Kennedy Jones. Elisa is an American memoirist, blogger, novelist, and public speaker. And she comes on the show next week to talk about her new book, Gotham Girl Interrupted, where she dives into how she was diagnosed with ecstatic epilepsy when she was 40 years old. If you want to find out more about Alisa, you can head to her website, alisajones.com. You spell Alisa A-L-I-S-A. And you can also find her on Twitter. She is I Am Gotham Girl. You can also find her blog at iamgothamgirl.com. But we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/324, along with everything we talked about today with Sada. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. I love you all so much. Go and get that creative work done, and we will see you next week if you need the push again. Keep it up, everybody. I love you. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.